heard since the budget was presented that there is no program in the budget on the 24-hour economy initiative. In fact, the minister himself said they will launch it soon. If it is not in the 2025 economic policy and budget statement, then it is not for 2025. It means no money is to be voted for it. So Ghanaians will have to wait at least until 2026 if we are lucky to have any hope of seeing how this campaign slogan translates into jobs. NDC, as you know, campaign on 24-hour economy, and yet they are in no hurry to deliver on it. NPP campaigned in 2016 on free senior high school, and it was delivered in Akufo-Addo's first budget of 2017. Yeah. Still on our record performance, not only were the trade balances brought from deficits under President Mahama's first term to surpluses under Akufo-Addo Bawumia government, but our capacity to withstand shocks and other external vulnerabilities improved significantly, with a record gross international reserves of $8.9 billion, the equivalent of 4 months of import cover. This compares better against the research economy's projected gross international reserves of 3 months of import cover. So the 8.9 billion we have given them, what are they going to do with it such that this year 2025, when they should be increasing it to 11 billion, they are talking about 3 months of import cover. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the technical bit that gives you the background of where we are coming from. The economy that has been described as bad and figures manipulated to create that narrative. You have heard from me our record, and this data is public data. But we are yet to even hear more about the 2025 budget itself. And to start with this, I have the pleasure to invite my colleague, the chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, the Honorable Abna Osei Asare.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Amin Adam. And thank you very much for the opportunity as well. I will go into the fiscal sector. The fiscal sector will look at the revenues as well as the expenditure for 2025.
Yeah. Perhaps you should come here.
Change position.
Yeah.
Change position.
Okay. No, don't worry. So just continue.
Transportation. Like I said, I'm going to look at the fiscal sector for 2025, and that would involve the expenditures as well as the revenues that they voted in the budget. Let me begin by saying that it is interesting that the minister, in highlighting his fiscal policy strategy for 2025, uses phrases such as, "It is crucial that we establish macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability." A few months ago, the IMF concluded its third program. Let me quote just a section of the staff reports. Ghana's policy and reform efforts under the IMF-supported program have continued to deliver encouraging results. Following acute economical and financial pressures in 2022, the fund-supported project has provided a credible anchor for the government to adjust macroeconomic policies and launch comprehensive reforms to restore macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability, while laying the foundation for higher and more inclusive growth. These efforts are paying off, with the growth recovering rapidly, inflation declining, although at a slow pace, and the fiscal and external positions further improving. End of the quotes. So clearly, we have laid a solid foundation for this government to operate. And so it is very disingenuous for them to create an impression as though we have bequeathed an economy full of problems. Let's come to the revenue numbers they showed in the 2025 budget. In 2025, the real growth of total revenue and grants, as we see in pages 132 of the budget and pages 134 of the budget is just 0.2 percentage points. We left it at 15.9%. That is tax to GDP. We left it at 15.9%. And an economy that claims to be resetting is saying that I am only growing revenue by 0.2%. That is 16.1% of GDP. At the end of 2024, our revenue numbers were 186 billion Ghana cedis. And they want to grow it to 224 billion Ghana cedis in 2025. Like I said, the growth in real terms is not encouraging. But when you look, if you listen to the minister on Tuesday, in paragraph 173, the minister stated in the budget statement that they are projecting a tax revenue percentage of 17.2%. So clearly, two different figures are being shown here. But like I always say to people, the real details are in the budget. The real details are in the appendices of the budget. Minister in his speech says, I'm growing revenue by 17.2% of tax to GDP ratio. And then you come into the budget and it's 16.1% credibility of our budget. Let me come to the expenditures as well. My minister, the former minister, made mention of a 24-hour economy. And so I will skip that. But let me say that when you compare our expenditures in 2024, when we had an election, usually with elections, the government spends so much because they have to give the Electoral Commission everything that they will need to conduct a free and fair election. So when you look at the appropriation for 2024, clearly with an election that was fully funded by government alone, the appropriation was 250 billion Ghana cedis. Here we are, NDC telling us that they want to cut waste, reduce, rationalize expenditure, and reduce the waste in the system. They are giving us an expenditure, an appropriation of 291 billion Ghana cedis. 291 billion Ghana cedis. No election. We are cutting down. So they say one thing, and the numbers in the budget speaks to something completely different. That also boils down to the credibility of the budget. Let me come to the uncapping that the minister spoke about. The expenditure measures of uncapping transfers to some statutory funds to enable them to fund other government programs is no-brainer. We have done it before. And so it's just continuing with what we also did. Every government has its discretion on how to fund its programs. While we cap the transfer to the statutory funds and use the cap transfers funds to fund free SHS and other programs, this NDC government has decided to uncap transfers to GET Fund so that GET Fund will fund free SHS. We have done it before. It is nothing new. We uncap and cap, and it's at the discretion of the minister. Where you find that you need to restore the capping, you restore it. And we did that in 2017 when we realized that NHIS was saddled with a debt of about 2 billion Ghana cedis in claims. In 2016, that was what the NDC left for us, and we made sure we provided enough funds by restoring the cap funds in NHI to enable them pay this. So we have done it before. It is nothing new. And so we were thinking that with the resetting, something innovative was going to come up, but nothing new came up. We have done it before, and it is normal. Also, by virtue of the debt restructuring, let me say that the government absorbed the GET Fund debt. And so once we absorb the GET Fund debt, there's more room for GET Fund to take on other equally important things. When you also look in the budgets that they provided for us, you realize that all funding coming from the oil revenues, that's the annual budget funding amount, the ABFA, every little fund coming from that has been put into the big push, 13.8 billion, which includes our mineral royalties and the oil revenue as well. And you ask yourself, you dedicate 13.8 billion Ghana cedis into this fund. But when you look in the budget, this is supposed to be their documents for policy and directions. You don't see so much about the big push, but here we are, they voting 13.8 billion Ghana cedis to an initiative called the Big Push without any skin or flesh for Ghanaians to see what exactly they want to do. Per the Earmark Funds Capping and Alignment Act, it is okay for the minister, like I said, to exercise discretion with statutory funds. And so we await to see what the minister will do once they bring the amendment to Parliament for us to look at it. The minister also said a lot about social spending. As part of the IMF agreement, we were supposed to spend a certain amount of our revenues on social spending. These 4 social spending initiatives: capitation grants, NHIS, and LEAP, and school feeding. So when the minister mentioned that there's a strategy and so they are going to increase that of school feeding, they are also going to increase the numbers for LEAP. It is something that is already drawn out in the IMF program, and as and when you get there, you implement it. So that is also nothing new. So in resetting the economy, clearly nothing new has been given to us. Let me also state that for me, I was thinking that, and we were thinking that if clearly the minister wanted to rationalize expenditure, he would have created that enabling environment for the private sector to take up that heavy lifting. That was what we were thinking, that clearly if you want to cut expenditure, give that heavy lifting to the private sector. Come up with initiatives that will support the private sector to take up the employment, grow the industries, and take that burden off government. But we did not see that. The measures outlined to enable the private sector grow, such as the support for women entrepreneurs, agriculture for economic transformation agenda, the rapid industrialization for jobs initiative, among others, are all centered heavily on the government. And these things, once it's on government, it's temporary, it's not permanent. And so you cannot grow the economy as you ought to grow if you had given that space to the private sector. So I believe that the budget failed to provide the mechanics of the policy, making all these huge fiscal implications that I have mentioned credible. And so they will have to come back again to tell us how they are going to fund this and also help the private sector. You see, the Mahama Cares program, the NEIP program, and the YouStart were initiatives helping the private sector to grow. Now, funding has been removed from all these initiatives. The YouStart, the Mahama Cares were addressing the issues of the SMEs. And we know the important role SMEs play in this country. They, give us about 70 to 80% of employment. And then they also sustain and hold the economy. And you heard the minister mention that our growth of 5.7 in 2024 was being led by industry. And so if you take out these small supports that government was giving to them, then clearly we are in for some disappointments in that area as well. And so what I want to say about this budget is that it looks ambitious. But when you look at the numbers doesn't tell that story. Before I end, I also want to put on record that we have seen some new development in the expenditure numbers. That's a bit shocking to those of us on this side. Look at the compensation amounts and the Office of Government Machinery. During the MPP era, Office of Government Machinery had a budget for compensation of 326 million Ghana cedis. And that included the development authorities, included national, the scholarship secretariats, and a couple of other agencies. Maslock, SIGA, and the others. But here we are in 2025. When you look at the expenditure numbers, the compensation under OGM is 2.7 billion Ghana cedis. From 326 of a perceived overblown government to a lean government of 2.7 billion Ghana cedis, where they have also taken away some of these agencies. Now SIGA is no more under
Thank you very much, Honorable Abena. And on the note that she ended, just some little information to indicate how reckless the President Mahama government intends to be in terms of the expenditure. If you go to Appendix 4A, page 139 of this budget document that was presented to Parliament, it talks about some of the expenditure lines. And under the Office of Government Machinery, we have a research department. And the research department, when President Akufo-Addo was there, he had a research department headed by Dr. Zekosu Mensah. President Mahama is allocating 50 million cedis for goods and services for research department at the Office of Government Machinery. A4 sheets, printers, pens and papers, office at the Office of the Research Department, all of that 50 million cedis. And CAPES, 20 million cedis. Office of Government Machinery, Research Department, maybe a head and 2 or 3 assistants sitting in one office, 70 million cedis. This is a government that wants to cut costs. Again, the same appendix, we have government communication. This is Felix Ofosu-Kwakye and Shamima Muslim. Government communication. They said they have collapsed Ministry of Information. They've saved money. Yet, under government communication, headed by Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, deputized by Shamima Muslim, let's say they have 2 or 3 research assistants helping them, scrolling through social media, Ghana web, to see what is happening there to respond. They are giving them goods and services budget of 8.8 million cedis. Maybe they will use some to buy internet data to go to the internet, TikTok and co, to respond to what minority is saying. And they are giving them 70 million cedis, making 78.8 million. This is higher than about 3 or 4 ministries put together under President Akufo-Addo. This is higher than 3 or 4 ministries' budgets put together under President Akufo-Addo. This is the lean government Ghanaians voted for. I'll go to my main substantive issue. And I will briefly address the issue of debt and what the finance minister describes as an achievement by lowering the rate of the Treasury bill market. And as we all know, the discourse surrounding Ghana's debt profile from 2009 to 2024 is both multifaceted and pivotal. Remember, under President Kufuor, we had HIPIC, and we were able to complete the HIPIC program, and that gave Ghana some external debt relief. And this led to a significant decline in our public debt to GDP ratio. However, the public debt stood at $8.07 billion in 2008 when President Kufuor exited. Under the NDC, for 8 years, Ghana's total public debt increased from $8.07 billion to $29.2 billion by the end of 2016. This, in cumulative terms, represents an increase of 261.83%. That is how much the NDC government, the previous NDC government, increased Ghana's total public debt. This rate of change indicates that on average, the NDC government added 32.75% debt to Ghana's debt stock every year, 32.75% every year, and cumulatively they increased it by 261.8. Those who say that President Akufo-Addo has borrowed more, so just listen to how much President Akufo-Addo added to Ghana's debt stock. Contrary to public perception, the public debt, which stood at $29.2 billion in 2016, has increased to $49.3 billion in 2024. This marks a little over 1.5 increase in overall, and this represents an increase overall of 68.83% to our total debt. The NDC in 8 years increased our public debt stock by 261.83%. The NPP under President Akufo-Addo increased that by 68.83%. And unlike the trajectory in 2009 to 2016, on average, the NPP government under President Akufo-Addo added 8.6% to Ghana's debt stock every year, whilst the NDC added 32.75% to Ghana's debt stock every year. Today, when they mention Ghana's debt stock, they forget to include that it includes all the debt stock built up to the NDC era. From independence. And if you do the computations and isolate, disaggregate it into regime by regime, they cumulatively added 261.8%, and the MPP did 68.3%. This is certainly not comparable. There's a lot of history to our debt, but I don't want to bore you with that. You will see that in the extracts. Remember, President Akufo issued the first Euro bond, and the NDC under President Mahama from 2013 to 2016, every year were issuing Euro bond to the tune of $1 billion every year. And Ghana had to pay the highest interest rates on our Euro bonds ever in the history of this country. Of particular significance is the one they issued in 2014. And even the one they issued in 2015, that was 10.75 or 75%, came as a result of even the World Bank intervening for Ghana. Otherwise, Ghana on its own balance sheet could not get that loan. That is the history of our debt performance. But it is important to put this into context. Whilst they were saddling the country with higher interest rates, a lot of mitigation had to be done by the President Akufo-Addo government to reduce some of these rates to benefit Ghana. For example, if you remember, when upon assuming office in 2017, government had to pay off 2 of the 4 Euro bonds issued under NDC government in 2013 in 2016. So when President Akufo-Addo came into office in 2017, the bonds that were issued in 2013 and 2016 were due for payment. President Akufo-Addo had to pay. He didn't complain because government is a continuum. He had inherited assets, he had inherited liabilities, he went ahead to settle them. On top of that, the African Development Bank loan for the Terminal 3 project in 2015 had interest rate of 8.5% recorded in the books of the GCAA. And the NPP government renegotiated this interest to 5% in 2018. Again, the initial loan on the Tamakoso-Mbo Standard Gauge Railway project, which was signed in November 2016 and financed by the Exim Bank of India, had 6 months LIBOR plus 1.75%. But the NPP government in 2017 went to India to renegotiate that loan down to 6 months LIBOR plus 1.5%, saving this country money. Again, the Procuracy Interchange project, which was financed by the African Development Bank, led to renegotiation into 4th-tier under Nana Akufo with same financing arrangement, just as 3rd-tier that was contracted by the NDC. And lastly, if we remember, before they left, they had collateralized the road fund for 1.2 billion cedis loan from UBA Bank at an interest of 31.9%. This is a loan the NDC took from road fund, collateralized the road fund. So when President Akufo-Addo came in 2017, any funds that entered the road fund was swallowed by UBA. There was no money to construct roads. And they procured this 1.2 billion Ghana cedi loan at an interest of 31.9%. What did the MPP do? We did not complain. We simply put together our financial engineering arrangements and we renegotiated, we refinanced this loan with another facility from GCB Bank and Fidelity Bank at an interest of 22%. President Akufo-Addo had to save this country money by renegotiating the loan that was taken by the NDC at 31% and refinance it with 22% interest. There was no fund going to the road fund. They had collateralized it. So in 2017, President Akufo-Addo had no money to do roads in this country, but he went ahead to do the needful. Under the financial sector performance, the finance minister put out a lot of negative data, and that is affecting him, like the minister said, on the bond market. The Bank of Ghana's 2017 and 2024 publication of Summary of Economic and Financial Data provides very rich information about the performance of the financial sector. The annual growth in total assets of the financial sector as at the end of 2024 was 33.8%. This compares to an annual growth rate of 27.6% at the end of 2016. So when President Mahama left office in 2016, the financial sector was growing at 27.6%. By the time President Akufo-Addo left in 2024, it was growing at 33.8%. So today, Ghana's financial sector is robust and healthier than as it was under President Mahama. Again, the annual growth in total deposits at the end of 2024 was 28.8% as compared to 24.5% in 2016. People did not have confidence to take money to the bank in 2016 as they are doing in 2024 and today. Similarly, in terms of liquidity, core liquid assets to short-term liabilities, we grew it by 46.6%. And then on the capital market, we have seen similar growth performance with the Ghana Stock Exchange All-Share Index year-to-date growing by 56.2% by December 2024. And I remember very well in 2013, I was writing a thesis on the Ghana Stock Exchange. The market nearly collapsed. But today, Ghana Stock Exchange is growing by 56.2%. The earnings and profitability ratios show that return on assets before tax recorded an annual growth of 5.4% in December 2023 and 5% in December 2024. Whilst return on equity after tax grew by 34.2% in 2023 and 30.8% in December 2024. It is no secret, therefore, that the strength of an economy is also determined by the strength of its financial sector. And lastly, before the Venerable Kojo Okonkroma comes in, the minister talked about the Treasury bill market and talked about the decline in the rates. And this is what he said. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to report that our government's proactive fiscal management has yielded a significant reduction in T-bill rates. This achievement is testament to the positive shift in investor sentiment regarding our country's economic outlook. Now, if there's a reduction in T-bill rates, what is the common expectation of Ghanaians? The common expectation of Ghanaians is that if indeed it is supported by the economic fundamentals, it must translate in a lower cost of credit. Other than that, it becomes sticky downwards. But let's ask the minister. T-bill rates have reduced to say 19.0%. What has happened to cost of credit at the commercial level? Loans we are talking about. Now, despite the minister talking about this, there are interesting developments happening on the T-bill market. Anytime T-bill rates go down, all other things being equal, it must be commendable. However, there are questions to be asked as to whether or not these rates are artificially managed by the minister and whether or not they are sustainable. And we have to ask the question whether the minister is controlling both price and quantity on the T-bill market. And I ask these questions for two reasons. First, the decline in the Treasury bill rate is not consistent with the fundamentals of the economy. We have inflation at 23.5%. We have monetary policy rate at 27%. How then can you have a Treasury bill rate lower than the inflation? If it happens like that, it means that treasurers and commercial banks who are participating in the T-bill market are participating at a real return in the negative. Because when you go for T-bill and you are earning less than inflation, it means that there's a component that is eaten away by the inflation. So it doesn't make sense. No treasurer, all other things being equal, will go and buy T-bills, gives him a lower return, and then inflation consumes the whole thing. Negative real return. Why is it that the monetary policy rate is still at 27%? And why is it that inflation is above the Treasury bill rate? And like I've said, a good treasurer will not do this. And if any good treasurer will not do this, don't we suspect artificial hands to bring down the T-bill rates for propaganda purposes? If this is generated by economic fundamentals, then the monetary policy rate is out in line with the market. Ideally, the central bank should bring down the monetary policy rate to where inflation is. If not, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the drops. If this is sustained and inflation is continuously above the T-bill rate, any rational treasury management will find solace in currency trading other than T-bills to give a negative return. And this disinflation process will dislodge. And a few days ago, you heard the governor of the Bank of Ghana cautioning the finance minister that the rate he is manipulating the T-bill rates to come down will affect the currency. And the governor is right, because if the banks after some time realize that the monetary policy rate is not coming down, inflation is not coming down, and they go for the T-bill rates and they will run at a loss, they will leave the T-bill market and go and buy currency, and that will put pressure on our cedi, and the cascading effect will be the transmission to inflation. The finance minister must understand this common economic principle, and I'm happy that the governor of the Bank of Ghana realizes this. Secondly, there appears to be what looks like the Bank of Ghana subordinating its monetary policy to fiscal policy, and that is dangerous. We all agree there's excess liquidity in the system. People are paid their coupons upon maturity from DDEP. People have cash in the system. When there's excess liquidity in the system, what happens? The Bank of Ghana, per the Bank of Ghana Act 2022, Act 612, and the Bank of Ghana Amendment Act 2016, Act 198, has the responsibility to ensure price stability. And the Bank of Ghana is the one that has the responsibility to mop up the excess liquidity from the system. How does the Bank of Ghana do this? The Bank of Ghana does this through the open market operations, the OMO. And if the Bank of Ghana goes to the market to issue the OMO is issued at monetary policy rate plus or minus 2%. So if monetary policy rate is 27%, let's assume the Bank of Ghana wants to do the lower end, minus 2%. That brings us to what? 25%. There is no treasurer or bank in the country who will go to the open market with Bank of Ghana offering 25%, a Ministry of Finance offering 19%, and decide to go for 19% and leave 25%. If if we're a shareholder, will you agree to that? You won't agree. So the fact that the T-bill market that is offering lower rate is oversubscribed indicates that the Bank of Ghana is reneging on its responsibility to mop up the excess liquidity and subordinating that monetary policy arrangement to fiscal policy by the finance minister. And that is an arrangement this government has done, all because they want to tell the public that there's oversubscription and that there's confidence in the economy. No rational investor will do this. That is why we think that they have to really stop this and let the market take its own shape. Other than that, the consequences for the economy going forward will not be good for us. And so this is what has to be done. And if you look at the T-bill market, the minister says, oh, they are oversubscribed and they are borrowing less. Let's ask the minister. Every time they go to the T-bill market, they accept offers more than their target. They accept offers more than their target. If you take every week, what target they went to the market, they accept more offers more than the target. That should tell you there's something fundamentally wrong. And the minister says they want to open the bond market for the yield curve at the long end to have a lot of purchases. Everybody will move to the short end because they don't have confidence that going forward the economy will assume the same trend as it is going. So they won't go to the long end. They will stay at the short end. And the minister is using the rates to entice them. Mind you, in Ghana we practice the Dutch auction. You cannot control price and quantity on the market. The finance minister is artificially manipulating the system and controlling price and quantity. He determines how much price he wants to give and he determines how much he wants to buy. And the Bank of Ghana is reneging on the monetary policy arrangement to go to the open market. And so when people go to the T-bill market, open market, Bank of Ghana is not there. Even if Bank of Ghana is there, it is accepting less. And they have the money. Investors are pushing them. Go and buy bills for us. So they all have to go to the T-bill. And that is what is forcing the rates now. It is not supported by the economic fundamentals. And we think this has to be dealt with. So in conclusion, and even before I conclude, Minister drew my attention to something. They complain about borrowing. And Atuforsen said government has about 153 billion cedis in terms of interest payments on domestic markets to pay. That is why he says President Akufo-Addo has left with for him. And he's going to pay about 70 billion next year and the others 50-something billion the following year. If Akufo-Addo in 8 years has left you 153 billion as interest payments on the domestic market to pay, and in 2 months, you have borrowed 73 billion cedis from the domestic market. You say Akufo-Addo left you 153 billion in 8 years. But in 2 months, this finance minister has borrowed 73 billion cedis from the domestic market. In fact, today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or today is Thursday. Tomorrow, Friday, the finance minister is going to borrow additional 6 billion from the domestic market, pushing it to over around 79 billion, close to 80 billion in 2 months. And this debt that you are accumulating, who will come and pay? You are leaving it for the next government to also come and pay. So this is so serious for us on the part that they are borrowing. So we can see clearly that we have a problem as a country and we need to address this problem. It cannot be addressed by the approach that this government is going. Other than that, by the time they finish this year, I can tell you, Atuforsen will end this year with domestic borrowing in excess of 200 billion cedis. The way they are going, even 2 months, you borrow 73 billion, if you extrapolate, it tells you that in 12 months, they will end the year with domestic borrowing of over 200 billion cedis. Don't forget, yesterday also, the former finance minister, Tepe, has indicated that they intend to borrow $4.something billion also from the international market. We are in for trouble, serious trouble. The whole of 2017, President Akufo-Addo's first year, the total borrowings he procured from the domestic market was not up to 15 billion cedis. The whole of 2017, how much President Akufo-Addo borrowed from the domestic market was not up to 15 billion cedis. In 2 months, Atoforsen, President Mahama, have done 73 billion cedis. We leave that to Ghanaians. And my senior brother, Kojo Ponkruma, will conclude for us.
So, colleagues, we are once again grateful for the attention you've given us. I want to pick up from where my brother GHOne just left off and conclude on a few issues. So when government does a budget, the budget is not an end in itself. The budget is an instrument to achieve some economic ends. So the taxes that you heard Abna talk about, even where they try to fudge up the numbers, the borrowing that you've heard GHOne talking about, even at an alarming rate, the previous record that Honorable Dr. Amin outlined, all of that is supposed to translate into some economic results. But the priority of the government is what will determine where these resources will go and therefore what results you will get. As was indicated, compensation alone at the Office of Government Machinery, 2.7 billion. And if you look at that particular appendix, total compensation for about 12 ministries put together is about 9 billion. And Jubilee House alone is taking 2.7 billion. A jump from the 326 that we were talking about. So it's about priorities. It's about where you put your money. For example, if you say you want to stimulate, about 9 billion under the administrative sector, 12 about ministries or agencies. Jubilee House alone, 2.7. So it shows your priorities. If, for example, you give 50 million Ghana cedis for research, which will not translate into any economic ends, and then you have something else like, let's say, the Women's Development Bank, which could actually assist women. And it requires, from my numbers, it requires about 1.5 billion to be able to do. About 400 million capitalization before you do your branches across the country, before your OPEX, before the float itself for the women. That one, you won't give it money. So it's about your priorities. Now, I just therefore want to demonstrate to you how the priorities of the government will not and efforts to improve the business climate, investment in healthcare, among others. Unfortunately, these issues have not been addressed by the economic policy. The priorities are elsewhere. For those who are looking forward to efforts to halt further increases in electricity bills, they have been disappointed to note that electricity prices will rather be adjusted every quarter. The minister referred to it as the quarterly adjustment of utility tariffs. Every 3 months, light bills will go up. Now, this quarterly adjustment with no policy intervention from the NDC government will mean, as I mentioned, an increase in electricity tariffs every 3 months. Worse is that the government clandestinely removed the subsidies on gas that is made available to the IPPs. Remember, because government was subsidizing, the pricing was at about $7.8 per MMBTU. If you listen to the minister in the budget, he says gas prices have been increased. Why on earth will the government increase gas prices? He hid the fact. The fact is that government, the NDC government, has withdrawn the subsidy. And that is why the price has gone up now to $8.4 per MMBTU. This gas is what is used by the IPPs to produce power, and then they'll pass on the cost to us. So in effect, two things are happening. It's a double whammy. Not only are electricity prices going to go up every 3 months, it will be going up at a higher rate from now. So there's no hope when it comes to the reset of energy pricing. Fuel price increase, for example, which influence the choices of direction. Contrary to the NDC's manifesto promise that they were going to use the special petroleum levy to intervene in the market and cushion consumers, the government went silent on that in the budget. Ladies and gentlemen, without any policy intervention announced in the budget, what it means is that drivers can expect that the rises in fuel prices will continue. Already since January, I'm sure you've observed how fuel prices are performing. And when the government had the opportunity to bring their economic policy, they were quiet on it. So there's no hope when it comes to resetting on the matter of fuel prices. Food inflation. You remember before the election, everybody was talking about food inflation, the size of a ball of kinky, the pricing of food stuff. It's been a major challenge to most Ghanaians. Now, you will recall that the MPP introduced a Planting for Food and Jobs program, which was aimed at boosting productivity. But there were some outstanding issues that needed to be dealt with to ensure that that increased productivity could translate into stable or reduced prices at the markets. In the policies outlined by the government in this 2025 budget, there are no efforts to deal with those outstanding issues. The government's program is only to boost production like the MPP did. The key remaining challenges, such as transportation of food items from farm gates, poor storage of foodstuffs, and a liberalized pricing regime, have not been attended to. And what it means is that the continuous increase in food prices have not been addressed. Food price inflation will therefore remain in the medium term. The 2025 economic policy has not addressed it. There is no hope when it comes to resetting the trend of food price inflation. Transport fares. Unfortunately, you can expect that transport fares will continue to rise. This is because the government has not introduced any measure to intervene with the market forces. You will recall that at the tail end of our administration, we announced the policy and actually started a shift towards electronic vehicles, among other things. The underlying issues of fuel and the increasing cost of imported spare parts have not been addressed in the 2025 economic policy. You recall that some of the levies on imported items, including the special import levy, was going to end by 2025. The government has imposed the special import levy from 2026, 2027, 2028. So spare parts are not coming down in prices. And if spare parts are not coming down in prices and fuel is not coming down in prices, what does it mean for transport fares? You are going to see a continued increase in transport fares. So I'm sorry to inform you that there's no hope when it comes to the reset they promised on the matter of increase in transport fares. On the matter of unemployment among the youth, which is one of the biggest issues. Remember, we did about 2.3 million jobs because through a combination of growing the economy average 7% before 2020, and then during this recovery back up to 5.7% by 2024, we were able to create a lot of space, and like Abena mentioned, in the private sector expansion to create jobs, about 2.3, and they said it wasn't good enough. So the youth were looking forward to either high growth targets to create jobs in the private sector, like she mentioned, or at least government employment programs in the public service so that they could also find jobs there. Unfortunately, neither of these two were expressed in the budget. In fact, if you look at paragraph 478 of the policy document, the government has announced a net freeze on public sector hirings. So for those who are hoping to get jobs in the public sector, sorry to disappoint you. Now go to the private sector. When the economy expanded average 7% before 2020, and during this recovery, 5.7 by 2024, we were able to create 2.3 million jobs. The government, when it submitted its program to the technical experts, they have marked the government's program that growth will drop from 5.7 to 4.4. If 7% average and 5.7 when we recovered did 2.3 million jobs, will 4.4 be able to do more than that? So if growth was expected to go higher, then you could have been having hope that young people will find jobs in the expanded economy through the private sector. Despite their rhetoric, the facts are that the hope for jobs has been extinguished in this 2025 budget. There's no resetting here. Actually, the situation will most likely get worse. We are wondering now whether this is the reason for which the government deliberately dismissed or terminated thousands of young people because they knew they were going to freeze new recruitments. Is this a reason for which they deliberately dismissed thousands of young people so that they could create an artificial set of vacancies to placate a few of their supporters who will still be expecting jobs when they come to office? While improving the job creation ecosystem is a problem, it is alarming, however, that they have elected a set of priorities to move the money elsewhere, and that's what we've already outlined to you, moving the money to Jubilee House, moving the money to OGM and other places. Infrastructure, and I'll end of these few ones. Infrastructure investments are known to be a key if you want to open up, grow the economy, create more jobs. Unfortunately, however, the government has failed in making the necessary budget allocations to give meaning to even their own planned infrastructure program. Their planned infrastructure program is what? The big push. $10 billion. If you prorate it over 4 years, that's about 2.5 billion cedis or $2.5 billion per annum. You will expect that if the government itself is serious about its own big push, they will at least make available $2.5 billion in their first budget when they have all the goodwill and the credibility. If you go into the fiscal tables, it's only $800 million, less than $1 billion. In effect, ladies and gentlemen, the big push itself needs a push. Else, nothing meaningful will happen in their infrastructure program. And finally, even more worrying is the Agenda 101 project, which many districts are looking forward to. It appears to be heading for a halt. Budget allocations for its continuation appear elusive. The dedicated source of funding, and you remember they misbriefed the president that there was no dedicated source of funding, that you needed $1.7 billion more to finish, and that only one had been completed. Even the brief they gave the president was not correct. 3 had been completed and commissioned. Already 400 million had been paid, so it wasn't 1.7 billion. And the claim that there was no dedicated source of funding wasn't true. The dedicated source of funding was Give Health, which was receiving funds from the CAPEX allocation of the annual budget funding amount. Now they've constrained it, as the government is signaling that they will cut funding to Give. Furthermore, no clear alternative financing has been identified in the budget to fund the project. And this is truly worrying, ladies and gentlemen. Not only is this contrary to the NDC's promises to health workers, you will recall that they will continue the project. You recall President Mahama, then candidate Mahama, promising the nurses that don't worry, we'll continue the projects and finish them and employ you in them. Now, you are realizing that this is becoming an illusion. Not only is it worrying, not only is it contrary, but abandoning these projects or giving them out as franchises, like the president mentioned when he came to Parliament for SONA, will jeopardize the efforts at universal health coverage. The millions of citizens in remote districts who are looking forward to their lives being saved from this healthcare intervention are now at risk. Mr. President, we beg you in the name of God, please do not abandon the Agenda 111 project for political reasons. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the 2025 budget does not offer any real reset. It does not offer any hope. Unfortunately, it will worsen the cost of living, it will worsen the unemployment situation, and it will worsen the rate of infrastructure development in our country. We thank you for your attention this afternoon, and we'll take a few questions.
Yes, please. We are going to take 4 questions. And then Honorable Kojo Ponkuma would do a summary of all of this in Twi, so that the sister stations running Twi programs can take them up. Please, are we okay? So please, yes. What's your name and station? Don't worry.
I want to find out from that the very day the Finance Minister presented in the press conference, he heard me say that the MPP government never received any tax. In that, everybody want to put out
Yes, Doc, would you want to take the questions first?
Okay.
So please, you have to take this seat.
Yeah, so come back. Yeah, so let's take more questions while we
So, yes, what's your name and which station or media?
My name is Kweku Secretary for GhanaMDs.com. Honorable Kojo Ponkuma, the big push, in your opinion, how best should it be implemented looking at what you said?
Okay, so can I have a lady? Just about Saturday, we had International Women's Day, so.
You're welcome to Newsroom. You're still watching Newsroom on GHOne TV. We had to start the broadcast with that press conference by the NPP minority in Parliament, responding to the budget statement that was read on Wednesday. And they say a couple of things. In the subsequent broadcasting, will bring you a real detail of all the things that they had to say, responding to the Finance Minister, Kesel Ato Forcing. But away from that, the Renal Patients Association is demanding inclusion on Mahama Cares board for smooth implementation following revelation of 9 committee members on the board. During the inauguration of the Mahama Cares task force, the Health Minister, Mahama Cares, said that there is no reliable source of funding for the free dialysis treatment on the NHIS. He also revealed a 9-member technical task force to develop a policy framework and modules for funding the Ghana Medical Care Trust Fund, also known as Mahama Cares.
According to the World Health Organization, non-communicable diseases account for 42% of all deaths in Ghana, with cardiovascular diseases comprising 19% and cancers 5% of all mortality cases. This is why government is inaugurating the Ghana Medical Care Trust Fund, also known as the Mahama Cares, to comprehensively address the treatment of chronic illnesses, including cancer, kidney disease, and heart conditions. The initiative is a bold response to these challenges as promised by the NDC in their manifesto. Here is the Health Minister speaking on the need of a task force to implement the policy.
There was no sustainable sources of funding for the dialysis. It never happened. I was a ranking member on the committee, and at the time we even suggested to make provision for dialysis, and they allocated 2 million Ghana cedis, and they had to go and take about additional 2 million from corporate social responsibility. I can tell you 4 million Ghana cedis cannot take care of dialysis in the whole country. So they need to be a sustainable and a reliable sources of funding. Look, if we decide to put all manner of disease on the National Health Insurance Scheme, it will collapse. We can't afford to put all these diseases on the National Health Insurance. That's why there's a need for us to provide this special purpose vehicle, a reliable one, so that if you are confronted with this chronic disease, it will not be the case that because you cannot afford the treatment, you then be nearing your grave.
Again, the Minister of Health, Kobna Minta Akando, noted the implementation of free dialysis on the NHIS by the erstwhile government had no reliable source of funding to keep it running.
This fund aims to provide dedicated financial support for individuals battling chronic and debilitating illness and expand access to quality care for these chronic diseases.
In his acceptance speech, Chairman of the Mahama Cares Task Force team, Reverend Professor Emeritus Seth Aite, gave assurance of the committee's commitment to diligently making the initiative a success.
We wholeheartedly accept to do this work. And as you said, we will do it with passion. We will give it all our heart, mind, soul, spirit, to alleviate the great suffering of people in this nation.
The technical task force is to develop a robust policy and legal framework to establish Mahama Cares as a statutory entity, design a sustainable funding model to ensure the fund's viability for generations, establish clear and transparent eligibility and disbursement criteria to guarantee fairness and efficiency, and evaluate the current healthcare infrastructure and suggest improvements to ensure accessibility.
Well, let's have a conversation on this. Joining me on the phone is Kojoba Ahenkwa. He's the president of the Renal Patients Association. Mr. Ahenkwa, thank you very much for your time. First of all, how do you receive the news that there was no reliable source of funding for dialysis?
Thank you very much. But that would be a shock and a big blow to me, because we were made to understand an amount of 57 million has been paid into the books to take care of the dialysis for the year 2025, and that the first 3 months has been paid. Well, we started from December, January, and February. So for it to come to me that there was no source of funding for it, I don't know what is going on, because I was reliably informed from the National Health Insurance that they took it to Parliament, and the Parliament, the Finance Minister came to announce that they were paying that 57 million into the government vote that it will be used. So for this to come, it's a big blow to me. But how is it that, does that mean that the previous administration were deceiving us, giving us hope, and they did not pay them, they said they paid, or what is going on? For me, all that we want is that we want our health. How it will be sustainable, we are pleading with the government to do something about it so that we can get our treatment in a good form.
Okay. I mean, you say that you were reliably informed that budget allocation had been made for it. Now the health minister is telling us otherwise. And what do you intend to do for your people beyond asking or making a plea that they cater for your health? Have you formally written to them?
No, we're trying to get it. We at the store a couple of times to know what the situation was about. We were not able to get the minister as I speak now. Come up. So the minister.
Okay. Now, Mr. Ahenkwa, one of the things that you are also asking for is to be included on the board of the Mahama Cares task force. What difference will that make?
We are the affected ones. We know what we go through. Okay? We are the affected ones. It's not just about the dialysis. There is a lot. The doctors will tell you, we are the affected people. Sometimes a person taking money to take transport from his place to the dialysis center is a challenge. So we need to be there to let them know what is that going on. And that's what we say, because when the then administration, when they were doing the national general, we also put our ideas to them. We are not that dumb. We have doctors, we have lawyers, we have ministers, we have MPs amongst us. So they should include us. So for us to know exactly what is going on, so we also tell them exactly how things work with the dialysis patient.
Is it that you do not trust that without your inclusion on the board, they will not look out for your interest?
No, apart from that. All what we are saying that we are the affected, we are feeling the things, we are feeling the things. If something is being done for us, we should be part and we should be part and parcel of it, so that we know how we communicate with our people.
But Mr. Ahenkwa, now the board or the task force has already been inaugurated. So what do you intend to do?
It's not too late. If they really want to do that, they can do it. It's not too late. If they really want to do that, it's not too late. Definitely, the board needs to be, the task force needs to be inaugurated. It's that. So adding a member does not spoil anything. It still can be done. If they really want to add us to it, it still can be done. There's nothing we can do. So we only just speak with them, for them to know how we feel and how things work with the renal patient.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Kojo Bafo Ahenkwa is the president of the Renal Patients Association. They're asking to be included on the board of the Mahama Cares task force, which was inaugurated yesterday by the health minister. Away from that, Deputy Presidential Spokesperson Shamima Muslim says government's free sanitary pad initiative will primarily target schoolgirls, especially those in public schools with a high population of vulnerable children. She emphasized that the initiative will prioritize local participation over foreign involvement. According to her, not less than 12 million sanitary pads will be allocated for the program.
Regarding the free sanitary pad for girls, obviously the primary target is girls who are in their periods. There are 12 million pads that we are planning to release as of this particular year under this current budget. Mostly the primary targets are public schools across the country. The Ghana Education Service has all those statistics and figures. We will always start with the most vulnerable schools that would have a population of the most vulnerable children who may come from households and families that are largely unable to take care of those needs of theirs. As you know, it is not everyone who is in their periods in all public schools who may present themselves to receive those pads, even though they will be made available to all public schools. As you have heard the President continue to say, and I think that he's been quite insistent on ensuring local content participation. And so we are expecting to see more local participation in this project than foreign. Most likely, coming days, we will hear the full details. As you would know, this particular project is going to be jointly implemented by the Ghana Education Service together with the Gender Ministry.
Well, let's still stay on this because for years, Oxfam in Ghana has been at the forefront of advocating for free sanitary pads through their Don't Tax My Pad campaign. Now, following the government's announcement of a budget allocation for the provision of sanitary pads to girls in primary and secondary schools, the organization has welcomed the initiative as a fulfillment of a long-standing promise. However, they are calling for broad consultation to ensure effective implementation and are pushing for locally manufactured pads to boost domestic production. Joining us now is the communications lead at Oxfam in Ghana, Archibald Adams. Mr. Adams, thank you very much for your time. I mean, first of all, you heard Shamima Muslim say that it was going to be heavily local content focused. So that's some good news for you then. But the big question is, do we have the capacity to produce it? I'm sorry, I think you have to unmute yourself because I cannot hear you. We have to apologize for that. Archibald Adams is the communications lead at Oxfam in Ghana. Mr. Archibald, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Great. Did you get my question? Ms. Adams, did you get my question?
Yes, I got your question.
Okay.
So good afternoon to you and your viewers. We're excited, like you mentioned, but let me put on record, it's not just Oxfam. It's a platform of CSOs working on sustainable development goals, which are championing this. So yes, we are happy that the Deputy Presidential Spokesperson has emphasized that it's going to be local, or it's going to be locally produced sanitary pads. Yes, as we speak now, there are currently 2 locally manufacturing companies in Ghana, and they have the capacity. I can put on record that they have the capacity. We had series of meetings. Their capacity or their production level is low now because of the numerous taxes that have been placed on the sanitary pads. So this is a welcome news. They have the capacity and they can meet the demand.
Ms. Adams, you're saying that 2 companies can meet the demand?
Yes, there are currently 2 locally manufacturing companies in Ghana as we speak, and I mentioned that they have what it takes to meet the demand of the 12 million sanitary pads as mentioned by the Deputy Presidential Spokesperson.
Okay, you also asked for broader consultation in implementing this policy. What exactly are the areas that you want government to consult on or focus on when it comes to rolling out of this policy?
Right, so we want to ensure that everybody that matters is brought on board to this discussion table. We want everyone to influence the distribution plan. We want to be sure that it gets to the girls who actually need them. We don't want to have reports where these sanitary pads are hoarded or locked up in one headmaster or headmistress's office, and then when the girls need them, they can't have access to them. So we want to be sure about the distribution plan. We want to be sure about the frequency, and then how many of these sanitary pads will be allocated to each girl, and that bit of accountability, so that together with government we can provide some bit of monitoring of this aspect of this policy implementation.
Okay, that's fine. But, you know, there are those who also raise the concern that why not just reduce the taxes further for the importation of sanitary pads? Because Shamima said that it was going to be distributed to girls in public schools. What happens to those in private schools? What do you make of the call to subsidize or reduce the taxes so that it's affordable for everyone?
Yes, so that is the ultimate aim of our campaign, to have the taxes on the sanitary part reduced so that everybody can be able to afford it. This is something from government chest, and we don't want it to be a yearly thing. So eventually, when we have these taxes removed, these funds can be used to probably construct wash facilities, can be used to improve public awareness and then education on even the usage, and bring on board the male child to support and ensure that our girls can menstruate in dignity. So we are appreciative, but we're thinking that the ultimate is for government to remove the taxes so that those girls who are out of school, let's put on record that the girls out of school are not captured under this free distribution, because the statement mentioned that it was going to be distributed to female students in primary and secondary school. So those in the apprenticeship groups, those out of school, have been left out. But ultimately, if we have taxes removed, everybody can afford and be able to get a part when they need them most.
Thank you very much. Archibald Adams is the communications lead at Oxfam in Ghana, and they have been pushing for a reduction or abolishment of taxes related to the importation of sanitary pads. Away from that, in today's episode of How Ghanaian Are You?, GHOne News' Khadija Idi engages with citizens to gauge their awareness of current events in the country. Now, interestingly, numerous individuals demonstrate a keen understanding of the latest development, while others view this as an opportunity to learn, particularly about the Speaker of the 8th Parliament. A thought-provoking question was posed. Who was the Speaker for the 8th Parliament? Take a listen.
Actually, I didn't do history.
Who was the 8th Speaker of Parliament?
Alban Bagbin.
Right Honorable Alban Bagbin.
The 8th Speaker of Parliament.
Right Kingsford Bagbin. Right Honorable Kingsford Bagbin.
It's not Speaker Alban Bagbin.
That was just a recent one. I forgot Michael Kwe. Right.
Honorable Alban Bagbin. I don't know. No. Is it Bagbin? No.
I don't really remember.
Right, well, the 8th Speaker of Parliament was and is Alban Kingsford Sumana Bagbin. Thank you very much for watching the news on behalf of the entire team, led by Mrs. Alice Amy. The news team will be back at 6:30 with News Tonight. I am Sewami here. Have a good afternoon.